Hello, everyone. Welcome into Simply Life. I'm Keith Casebolt, and with this cup of coffee, my good friend, stepping up to the microphone, Gary C. Johnson. Good to see you.
It's wonderful to be here, and today we are going to talk about questions.
About questions?
Questions.
Whew, I've got them. I've got them on everything.
I ran into this book, and I've started reading it, called The Book of Beautiful Questions by Warren Berger. And it's a really interesting book. So I wanted to share a little bit of it because I've just actually got started with my friends because it's so interesting. And the introduction is, why question? Really, when you think about it, why question anything?
Well, that's most things we don't, do we? I mean,
That's the point.
Oh, okay. All right. That's why the book is leading us to it, that we don't question it, and we should.
Guess what he said, and based on the studies that's been done? Guess who asked the most questions of any human beings alive?
Children.
What age?
Below 10, I would say somewhere between 5 and 8.
4.
4.
And guess out of that, between boys and girls, who asked the most?
Girls.
Right. And it said girls, little girls, 4 years old, will ask an average of 100 questions a day.
Wow.
I thought that was so interesting. Now, little boys ask a few more, but as they get older, they taper off, and by the time you get to be teenagers, because of the problems with questioning and people looking at you like you're a fool, they taper off to basically nothing.
You know, since you mentioned that, my youngest son was about 4 or 5, and he got sick. My father is a minister, retired now, but he picked up my youngest son at the time, and he said, Cameron, Papa is going to pray that you get better. And Cameron looked at him and said, why didn't you pray I didn't get sick?
He's a little late, right?
And my dad had no response to that. What a great question, huh?
This book talks about how if you're really going to advance, you need to learn how to ask questions about everything, especially yourself and what you're doing. And he talks in terms of he's concluded that there's 5 things that keep us from questioning. And one is, the first one, fear.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fear of being looked at like you're a fool, the fear of somebody thinking that's a dumb question, the fear of being embarrassed.
You don't understand?
You don't understand.
Yeah.
Why would you ask that question? And a question is really an admission you don't know, or you do care, which is even worse. But fear is the first enemy of people asking questions, according to this book, and I agree with that. I think that's true. And what this book is saying, you should question everything, especially your own beliefs in regard to society and things of that nature, to see if you may very well be wrong in what you have concluded. But question it.
And Gary, before anybody flips the channel and says, wait a minute, that's just being critical when you're doing that. You're not talking about criticizing. You're talking about legitimate questions.
Right.
And a lot of times if we question something, somebody thinks that we're being critical.
You know what he says the second greatest enemy of questioning is? Knowledge.
Knowledge.
He says the more you know, the less you feel you need to ask. But the problem here is twofold. First, we can easily fall into the trap of expertise, which is knowledgeable people who begin to rely too much on what they already know and fail to keep expanding upon and updating that knowledge. This is particularly perilous in times of rapid change. So he said, your knowledge may very well keep you from asking questions.
So you can look at something and you've got all of this expertise and knowledge, and somebody can maybe walk in off the street and go, what if you looked at it this way?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be a angle that you hadn't thought of.
The third enemy of questioning is bias.
Yes.
In terms of biases, some of them are hardwired in us. Others may be based upon our own limited experiences. But in either case, if we are predisposed to think something, we may be less open to considering questions that challenge that view.
I can understand that. I can completely understand that. And would that come more with politics, religion, work-related?
Right. And then the next one is time.
Mm-hmm.
Is an enemy of questioning. And it says the last enemy of questioning is time, or the supposed lack of it. We just don't seem to make time for questioning, starting in school. Ask any teacher about this. There is so much material to download that little time remains for student questions. And time is an even bigger source of pressure on adult questioning. There's just not enough time.
So if I question this, it could take all day. Let's just sign it and move on.
Well, you go to a presentation or a seminar, and a person will speak for an hour or two, and they'll have 5 minutes for questions.
Great point. Knowing that that 1 hour talk could easily generate 3 to 4 hours of questioning.
Which I learned something from just that little bit of reading in the first chapter of this book. The next time I teach a seminar, it will probably be all questions. I will throw out a topic, something, then I will open to questions. And I'll throw out another one, and I'll open it to questions. And instead of just downloading all of that information to them, to these attorneys, I'm going to get an interaction.
So this sounds like your method of judo law again. Instead of you coming in and saying, here's all the answers, you're going to come in and say, give me all the questions.
Here's what I do on this point. Now, let's talk about it. I want your questions. Here's what I do on this point. Now let's talk about it. That's how I'm going to do it next time.
I think that's great.
I'm going to change my approach.
I think it's brilliant because there's going to be somebody in that audience that's going to ask a question that maybe hasn't been discussed.
And that I will probably learn something myself from being there by doing that.
Twofold.
And he says in here, and this is a very recent book, it's just been published, that right now in our society that questioning is more important than it's ever been.
Well, it should be.
It is. He says it's clear. And he said, believe it or not, if we start questioning each other and talking and asking questions, it will actually bridge the gap between people. If they're open-minded when they do it.
To create understanding?
And he goes so far as to say the future of our way of life and government depends upon the questions we ask ourselves.
I would agree with that.
And he's got a little section here that says 5 all-person questions for better thinking. And the first question you ask yourself is, how can I see this with fresh eyes?
It's got to be the toughest one of all. I don't know what the other ones are, but you just talked about the bias.
Mm-hmm.
So any subject we come into, any topic that we talk about, the computer is already programmed back here to say, oh, I'm against this. I can give you a dozen reasons why. I mean, we're already set up on that.
The next one is, what might I be assuming that may not be accurate?
I've come to a stage in my life where I think I can answer that. 99.9. 5%.
The next question you ask yourself is simple. Am I rushing to judgment? Should I do more facts? Should I find out more before I make a conclusion here? Am I rushing to judgment? And here's a really good question. The next question on it, he says you need to ask yourself for better thinking. I mean, he's just talking, this is a big, long book, so this is just the first little tidbit of it I'm trying to share with you folks. The next one is, what am I missing? What's out there that I'm missing that's really I may be blindsided with? If ever that's ever a question, that question should be asked as when somebody's preparing a lawsuit.
My goodness. So so you're telling me if there's an illogical situation going on, there's probably an illogical answer to it.
I've always said for many, many years that you show me something out of the ordinary that's going on, and I will show you an out of the ordinary explanation for it.
But we do just the opposite, don't we? We try to take that out of the ordinary situation and we try to make it ordinary, or we try to fix it with ordinary thinking.
There will be no ordinary explanation for it, ever.
And that's why we can't solve the problem, because we want it to make sense.
But now that what am I missing?
What am
is
I missing?
critical. And that's critical thinking, especially if you're a lawyer. And if any lawyers are listening, remember, always ask this question every day when you're preparing a lawsuit. What am I missing? How am I going to get blindsided? What do they know that I might not know? What could be out there? What's on Facebook that I don't know about? What am I missing? What am I missing? Critical question to ask. And then the next one, again, this comes right back to the way I do a lawsuit. The next one is, what matters most?
What matters most?
What matters most? Now, how do you tie that to a lawsuit? Well, and years ago, probably 30 years ago, I coined the phrase outcome determinative. I don't even know if it's a word.
Outcome
Determinative.
Determinative, okay.
I just made it up because I thought it sounded good.
I couldn't pronounce it.
And believe it or not, lawyers have picked it up across the country. You go to seminars, you hear them talking about it.
You haven't told them that it's not a real word yet?
No, I haven't told them that it's really not. I don't. It's funny it's like this guy said that years ago he announced to the world he was a questionologist. He said there was no such thing. But he said, guess what? Nobody ever questioned it. I'm a questionologist.
He had the degree and the title, and no one ever questioned if he was.
And he's been asked by most 500 companies and everything to come and teach about questionology.
And nobody's ever looked up the fact that doesn't exist.
Right.
Now that's funny in its own right.
So I think anytime you have something happen and someone gets hurt or whatever, there's a reason for that. Somebody didn't obey a safety rule. They were going too fast. They were distracted. They weren't paying attention. There's some basis, something that caused it to happen. Well, the defense, if they're good lawyers, will interject all kinds of things into the trial or into the lawsuit to get you to argue about those things that really don't have anything to do with what caused the wreck. And if they can confuse the issue and get you to argue about things they might can win on, they're hoping the jury won't know the difference.
So they made the case about multiple things when in fact it was only ever about one thing.
They make the case about whether he smoked marijuana 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll argue with him about that. You get in a big an argument about whether he smoked marijuana 5 years ago. Well, he said he didn't, but this medical record said he did. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Big argument over here. Well, is that what the case is about then? No, it has nothing to do with what the case is about. But if you get over there and get in that argument as a lawyer, then you have switched it from the fact that this guy ran over this guy over to whether or not somebody smoked marijuana 5 years ago.
Is the hope of that, Gary, that if they trip up the client and he denies doing it 5 years ago, they can say, oh, well, look, he lied on that. He probably's lied about the other.
Yeah, but, you know, and the smart lawyers say, well, so what?
Yeah.
And that's what that question he is what matters most? You got to always stay focused on what matters most in your life. What matters most in your relationships? What matters most to each of us? And if we stay focused on that and don't get off on these tangential things, then we stand a chance at having a little bit of happiness maybe.
Because we know of people who've had great relationships together that stopped it over something small or minor.
That meant nothing. In the scheme of things.
In the big scheme of things, it meant nothing, and they stopped a good relationship or friendship or something of that nature. What mattered most was all the things that had taken place.
You should live life literally painting with a broad brush. Am I making any sense when I say that?
Absolutely.
And you need to take into context everything in your relationships with a person. And if the good outweighs the bad, then continue that relationship. Understanding that if you start dwelling on a little bitty bad or some bad, you will destroy the relationship.
And lose the good.
And lose the good. So you need to live life literally with a broad brush. You need to paint with a broad brush on life. And take everything into balance. And if you balance it out, then make a decision.
You know, I think years ago one time you were talking about relationships and you challenged our friends to pull out a piece of paper. And whoever the person was they were having a problem with, you said draw a line down the middle, make 2 columns. Put the bad over here, the good over here. And you list everything that's bad about this individual, and then come over and list everything that was good about the individual and your relationship. And if whichever column is longer gives you the answer. I mean, you made it pretty simple.
Well, talk to you about some questions he talks about on your biases and beliefs and how you should question, okay? The first one he said that you need to ask yourself is, what am I inclined to believe on this particular issue? Start by trying to articulate your beliefs and biases. In other words, what is my preconceived ideas here? What am I inclined to believe before you ever?
Oh, okay. I think I just got that. So that's when someone comes up and they give their opinion on a subject, and it is in line with yours, and you go, boy, that guy's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
You're going back to the preconceived notion that he answered the way you would have answered, so now you've elevated him to being bright.
There is no way you go through life without having biases and prejudices. Ooh, right?
Boy, now there's a lot of people saying, well, I
They're
don't
saying, not me.
Not me. I don't have any of those.
You can't get away from your raising. You're what you are. That doesn't mean you have to act on them. That doesn't mean you have to fall victim to them. But they're there. Just deal with them. Question them.
Mm-hmm.
But as you go through life, things happen that makes you have preconceived notions about things.
Even simple things.
Even simple things.
I mean...
And when something comes up, ask yourself before you do come to a conclusion, what am I inclined to believe on this particular issue based upon my prior biases, prejudices, or whatever?
Let me give you a simple one. Whenever I order a sandwich, I always say, please, no mayonnaise. And until recently, someone asked me, oh, you don't like mayonnaise? I said, no. They said, what about What's it about the taste you don't like? I said, I don't know. I've never eaten it.
Right?
I've never had mayonnaise. I just know I don't like it. So there's a preconceived notion and a bias towards something that I've never tried. I just know I don't like it.
The next question you ask yourself when you're dealing with your biases are, why do I believe what I believe?
What facts or what foundation makes me think, okay, this is true?
Yeah. The next one on that is, what would I like to be true here?
Oh, my God.
Because you're going to shade what you conclude based upon what you want it to be.
You will somehow find it to be that way.
And to bring it back into my field, years ago when that Kennedy boy who was not named Kennedy, but he was accused of rape,
Yes.
and they talked to one of the jurors afterwards, and she was a little old lady, and they acquitted him.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, when I first saw that young man, I knew he couldn't rape anybody. And I am so glad that that's what the evidence showed. How do you think she viewed the evidence?
It had to line up just exactly the way that she perceived it was going to.
And
Now,
that's what this question is. What would I like to be true?
yeah. You did the analogy on television just the other night about the towns. The people are good, the people are bad. They'll be whatever you think they're going to be. So this lady, when she saw him, said, the evidence is going to prove that he's a good young man and he didn't do this. And she was so happy it proved.
And she was so right, because any evidence to the contrary she would have discarded.
Now, that works in the reverse. Anybody that looked at him and said just the opposite.
Right.
You know, I can tell from looking at this kid he's guilty, and boy, I'm glad the evidence showed he was.
That's a bias.
Wow.
So you ask your question, what would I like to be true? And then you try to deal with your actions in accordance with that. The next one, what if the opposite is true?
It's going to be hard to get to the opposite if you've got that bias going in, though, isn't it?
Well, that goes with what I'm saying about why you should never fight a principal battle.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is simple. You may be wrong. And then you will have done immeasurable harm to someone or something,
Sure.
because that's why you don't fight it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are no absolutes. In my opinion, at my age, I'll say that again, there are no absolutes. And when you start saying, I'll never, 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 you might.
And maybe you should.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you're right, and maybe you should.
Because things change. People change. Life changes.
That is, Gary, that is a good book. And the thing I really like about it is it makes you think.
I just got started on it. I'm going to read a lot more about that.
I can't wait to see where it goes.
After all, he is a questionologist.
I think I could be the second one in the world.
I was looking at another little book called The Uncommon Leader by Mike Murdoch, the preacher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I ran across 7 little page here that says 7 decisions that can change your world in 7 days. And I thought, well, why not share those with my friends?
Let's see if it works.
Okay. Number 1, decide who you will ignore.
That could make us happy.
You know. Number 2, decide who you will enjoy.
That, too, can make us happy.
Number 3, decide who you want to impress the most.
There's got to be a reason for that.
Number 4, decide who's ignored you. Number 5, decide the task you no longer enjoy doing.
I think that's a good thing to think about.
Number 6, decide whose example is worth following with passion.
That one may be the most important one.
Yeah.
If you want a road to success, find a mentor or somebody that you think is getting it right and follow their path.
Number 7, decide what you want your daily world to be like. And he says you can do this one each day for 7 days, and it'll change your world.
Well, and I like that daily world because you talk about that all the time. The gift, all we've got is a day. So if that's it, what would you want your day to be like?
There's so much stuff out there in life that you can read and learn.
How much do you read a week?
I read everything I can get my hands on.
You know, that's the one thing I was going to tell you. Here you've got a book on questions. You've got a book over there from a minister. You come in with the Men's Health magazine. You bring in a book on the law. It's like your scope, you're all over the place with information on human interaction and everything.
Well, the problem with what I'm doing is it's teaching me I know nothing.
But are all these linking together?
They are, and it.
So, I mean, if you read something from one book, and then you go to another book and you read something, and the third book, is there like this light that goes off and says, okay, now I see how these connect?
And they do. But now I'm going to warn you folks about this. If you start reading everything out there and trying to understand and have a feeling for it, the more you do, the more you realize, the less you probably know.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah.
and that just makes me furious because, you know, I want to be important. I want to know all this stuff. Well,
So I've got all these books behind me that you've taught over the last 20 years. I've got them all on the shelf. I've been doing this program with you for 20 years, and I tell everybody, I'm close to where I know nothing. It's taken me 20 years to get to the point to where I can honestly say, I don't think I know anything.
but the one thing I have learned is it's up to you to determine whether or not you're going to be happy.
That I do know, because no one else can do it for you.
And another thing Mike Murdoch talks about in this same book is, which I thought was neat. So I'm going to share it with my friends. When I find something neat, I share it. It's unwrap the gift of today slowly, carefully, and with great expectations. And I've always said, be there, be in the present.
Absolutely.
Because it's a present from God, and that's why they call it the present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And he says, your present contains secrets. Your present contains gold. Your present contains hidden wisdom. Your present is a divine link. Your present is a wealth of wisdom. Your present season contains benefits that your hurrying will abort. And I thought that was interesting.
That is good, because none of us know what is coming to us today. I mean, we may have plans and we may have a calendar, but we don't really know what today is going to bring, and that Mike just pointed it out there. If you go slow enough, you might see or find all those things in your day.
And the one other thing I want to share with you guys, which I thought was so neat, in this book from Mike Murdoch, The Uncommon Leader, chapter 13, ask quality questions.
So here you start off with this book. You pick up a second book that should have nothing to do with the first book, and it confirms the quality questions.
Yeah. And he starts off, ask questions. Listening is a divine command. And he quotes, hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end, Proverbs 19:20.
There's your connection.
Ask questions to accurately determine the needs and desires of others. Interrogate your world. Insist on listening to the opinions and needs of others. Almost nobody on earth listens to others nor questions them. It is a master secret of success.
You think this guy may be a questionologist?
Think about it. What Jesus did most of his preaching was he asked questions.
Yes. So we went from that book to the Mike Murdoch book to the Bible and Proverbs, and the three all tied together.
Yep.
My friend, great lesson. We're about out of time today, but this, to recap everything, questions.
I'm going to read you one more thing in Murdoch's book about questions because I think it ties right into it. And he said there's 8 facts about questions. Asking questions is a command, which he's told us. Asking questions reveals the needs of others. Asking questions creates an entry point into another life. Asking questions reveals passion. Asking questions reveals caring. Asking questions removes doubt. Asking questions dissolves fears. Asking questions is a seed for change. Okay?
There you go. All right. You can catch Gary's television show. We got a couple of new programs coming your way. Simply the Law, Tuesday nights, 7 o'clock on WYMT. That's your CBS affiliate. Late night replay on WKYT in Lexington, your CBS affiliate for Central Kentucky. If you have any questions that you want to ask, you can go to Gary at GaryCJohnson.com. My friend, thank you for being here. Wonderful lesson today.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
We'll all be thinking about it. On behalf of Gary C. Johnson, I'm Keith Casebolt, and there's no question about it. We look forward to seeing you again next week, right here at this same time.